welcome to the course on data analytics using Excel. Now, we are going to cover a whole host of different applications of analysis. You're going to cover the phases of a data analysis project. We're going to talk about some of the functions in Excel. But let me take you through the agenda so you can see the whole scope of what we are going to achieve in this course. So the agenda is we're going to cover the phases of an analytics project. We're going to talk about data cleaning and functions. We're going to be talking about how to sort data and filter data, and also to be able to use some lookup functions like VLOOKUP, conditional formatting, data validation, pivot tables, which are supremely important in data analysis. And then we're going to cover data visualization using Excel. So what are the phases of a data analytic project? And it really has three phases that we want to cover. We want to cover data cleaning, data analysis, and data visualization. And depending on the shape of your data, also depends on how much time you're going to spend in each one of these phases. So data cleaning is usually where you're going to spend the most of your time. So you're setting up your problem statement, performing preliminary analysis, fixing misspellings or character issues, removing duplicates, and checking for bias. So once you have that set up, then you move over to your analysis. So in data analysis, the first thing we want to be able to do is clearly understand that problem statement. We want to adjust and format the data to help us answer that problem statement. And then we want to find the appropriate relationships within the data or between the data sets. And lastly, we want to be able to communicate our results. And the way we do that is through visualization. We want to deliver the data and insights in the most efficient way. This helps to make critical decisions in an unbiased manner because you've created a visualization that's clear and concise and helps to deliver your point directly. So let's talk more about data cleaning, which is an essential step in the data analyst project. So the most important thing we want to make sure we do is to ensure we have high data integrity. We want to be able to check if there's bias involved in the data collection. Data should be in line with the problem statement. So you shouldn't be looking at data that is very unrelated. If you're looking at analysis of horse dimensions, you shouldn't be using a data set based on supermarket sales. Data should have a complete sample size. So if you are being asked to analyze the trends annually and you only have 2 months of data, that is not going to be sufficient for your analysis. And there should be some uniformity in the data so you don't have all these different variables that may complicate or skew your analysis. So let's talk about functions, which are an essential part of Excel. And what is a function? They are predefined instructions that perform specific calculations in a particular order in a spreadsheet. And functions exist in every analysis platform. If you use coding, if you use BI tools, functions are your way of being able to execute repeatable instructions. So the basic syntax in Excel is we have a formula and then we execute that formula over a cell or a range of cells. So if we take the average, we know the average is going to be a collection of cells. And if we use this average function, we have average, which is a key start of the function. Then we have the formula name. But to initiate that function, you need to use equals. That will start your ability to cycle through the functions in Excel. Then we are able to bring up a function name, such as average, And then we're able to include a range of cells. So what are some of the example functions in Excel? We have COUNTIF, len, left and right, concatenate, and trim. And these are some great functions for data cleaning. So what is COUNTIF? A function that counts the number of cells that match a specific condition. COUNTIF has the essential parts of an Excel function. We initiate that function with equals. We use the start of the function, which is the keyword, which is COUNTIF, and then we pass in the parameters that are needed. We give it a range, and then we give it the condition. So where do we want to count the particular cells? Do we want to do C1, C2, C3? Also, what is the condition in which we should count that? So this is a conditional. Length is a function that returns the length of an existing string. So we initiate the function with equals, we use the keyword, len, and then we specify the cell. Left and right. A function that returns specific number of characters from left or the right side of the cell. We use the equal sign to initiate that function. We use the cell to specify the location of our particular number or character. And then we say how far right or how far left we should go in. In this specific function, we're doing left, so maybe we start from the first character or the second character, and we indicate that within the function parameter. In the same way we initiated the left function, we do the same for the right. We are just changing that keyword. So the keyword is right. We specify the cell. We evaluate the characters within the cell, and we tell it where to start. So we're starting from the right side and how many characters to move within that character. Concatenate. Concatenate is a function that combines multiple text cells into a single cell. So maybe you have two words you want to combine to one. So, or two values you want to combine to one. So concatenate, and we then specify the cell location. Cell 1, cell 2, A1, A2, A1, or B1. Trim. So this is a function that removes extra unwanted spaces from the cell. We specify this with the keyword trim, and then we pass in the cell location. So let's dive into Excel and look at the COUNTIF function. So we have a task here. A task is to find the total number of movies with English, French, and Italian languages. Now, of course, we could count each one of these manually, but that wouldn't be a very efficient way of doing this. So what we want to do is use the COUNTIF function. Now, you may not be familiar with this function, so what you should do if you've never used the function before is navigate to the top tab, go over to Help, and in that section there's a Help section. Then you can actually search for the function that you're looking for. So there's COUNTIF, and now we will be given examples on this function. So we can see different examples. So now if I keep this window open and I navigate over to English, and we know we initialize a function with equal, and then COUNTIF, and now I can see the two parameters that are needed. I need a range of cells, and then I need the criteria. And the criteria needs to be given in a specific way. And we can see the criteria needs to be encapsulated in quotes. So let's give it the range. which would be B2 to B22. And let's give it the criteria. We want to be able to see English. And now we are rewarded with 5. So I'm going to click this off because I know how to do this. So I'm going to just take this and copy it because our range doesn't change. And now I'm going to be given French. So I'm just going to change the criteria to French. And I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to change this one over to Italian. And now we have our counted languages for our movies using the COUNTIF function. Let's look at the trim function. So what the trim function is going to do is allow us to remove some of the trailing spaces and some of the leading spaces from our data set. So we can see there's a space missing in the front and we can't see if it's one in the back. So this is what trim allows us to do. So we can just pull this over this cell so I can keep the same style. And I'm going to change this to a different title. So trimmed movie titles is going to be the name of my column. I'm going to initialize that function with equal. I'm going to use trim. And then all I need is one parameter, which is the text. This is our text. And now I can close that function off with the parentheses. And now if I have this function, I can highlight the plus sign and just click it all the way down. And now we can see this leading space is gone from our particular cells. So let's look at our next function, which is the left and right function. So imagine we have this column of data and it has concatenated PIN code and the county name. We want to be able to pull out the PIN code. So let's first just pull this cell over so we can keep the style. I'm going to change the name and I'm going to call that PIN code. Then what I'm going to do is I can see that my PIN code is on the left side. So that means I want to use the left function. So we're going to go equals, left, equals and left. Now we can see that function takes 2 arguments. It takes the text, which we know is here. Then we move to the next argument with our comma. And we want to know the number of characters we should move from left to right. So our PIN code is 6 characters. So let's put in 6 and close that off with the parentheses. And you can now see that we have the full PIN code. We can highlight the cell and we know if we click on this plus sign, the cell is going to navigate down the list of county and PIN code and remove the PIN code. Let's move to concatenate. So with concatenate, what we're going to do is take 2 strings or 2 text values and put them together. So we are looking at the first and last name, and we want to be able to get the full name. So let's use equals to initialize our function, and let's use concat. Now we can see concat and concatenate. So there is a exclamation sign here. So if I go to concatenate, and remember we can always use our help. So I'm going to navigate over to Home. I'm going to go over to Help and click the Help icon. And I'm going to type in CONCATENATE, because I'm very curious why we have that exclamation mark. CONCATENATE function is in one of our results. And what does it tell us? It's important that this function is going to get deprecated and turned into concat. So let's use it while it lasts, but it will be removed at some point. So I'm going to use concatenate. And now all we need to do is pass it a text value, use a comma, and pass it another text value. So I'm going to highlight the first name at A2, which is our first value. I'm going to move over to B2, and then I'm going to hit enter once I close that function off with a parenthesis. And now you can see we've been rewarded with the first and last name that is smashed together. However, it would probably make more sense to have a space there. So what we can do is between these two cell values, we can put our quotations and put a space and then close that and hit enter. And now you can see we have the first and last name with a space. Now, unlike the previous function, if I try to click this plus sign, it will not go anywhere. It requires me to drag it down. That's because we don't have this column connected to this kind of table or next to the column. However, you can see if I just highlight the information from that column, and when you see this cross sign, you can move it over. And now if I highlight the plus sign, I can pull all of that over, but you can see there's a mistake. We want to make sure the plus is from the top. Now that will give us all of the values, which will be the first and last names. Conditional formatting, which could be considered a part of analysis and data visualization. So Excel is a tool that allows you to change how those cells look. And when we're using conditional formatting, we can change how those cells look based on specified values, rules, and the change will be represented in highlighting, bars, colors, icons. So there's a lot of options. Let's move over to conditional formatting. So conditional formatting allows us to highlight, colorize, or place icons using a conditional method. For example, it might be we want to make high colors, we want to make high values certain colors and low colors certain colors. So we can do that with conditional formatting. I'm going to highlight this column of information. I'm going to go to Home, and now you can see conditional formatting here. I'm going to click the caret. And what this allows us to do is spot trends. So we can highlight cells based on rules. We can look at the top values. We can look at data bars. And then we can look at color scales and icon sets. So let's go from the bottom to the top. So I'm looking at icon sets. And if I move this over, and you can see there's icon sets there. So I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And what the icon set is using a set of rules where it's looking at the values and saying if they are low or high. Now I can go back over to this and I can go to clear rules from selected cells, and then that goes away. So now let's highlight all of these cells because we don't have to stick to just one column. We can look at the whole numerical table. And let's go to color scales. And you can see I can navigate the different color scales and it will highlight the values based on that. I can go to data bars and we will get a similar result. If I go to top and bottom, so if I want to identify or highlight the top 10 items, you can see that it tells us how it's going to be filled. The top 10 items are going to be filled with light red and dark red text. I can go back over and I can go to conditional formatting and I can go to the bottom 10 items and then I can say, okay, I don't want light red and dark red. I'm just going to choose a different text. I'm going to choose green fill with dark green. And now we have those values highlighted. Of course, we can go back over and clear our formatting. So we can go to clear rules. Now, finally, you can put your own rules there. So we can go over to conditional formatting. We can go to new rules. And now you can see that we have different types of rules that we can use. So we can format all cells based on their values, based on this color scheme. So you can definitely choose different color schemes that you're interested in. For example, maybe for our lowest value, I'm going to choose white. And for our highest value, I'm going to choose this purple. And this is going to be based on the lowest and highest value. So I click that and you can see we have that. We can also press Control Z to get rid of that formatting. So we can also not be restricted to numerical columns. Here we have some criteria that is text. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. I'm going to go to new rules. And then I'm going to use format only cells that contain. And then I'm going to say specific text. And I'm say containing C. So any of the cells that have a C in it, I am going to highlight. So how do I want those cells formatted? I click format and we can do a font change. We can change borders or we can do a fill. I'm going to fill that cell with maybe this high yellow value. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to initialize that. And we can see this whole column, including the header, is highlighted. So you can do a lot to show different trends with conditional formatting. Next, let's look at the length function. So we know the length function is going to allow us to count the characters within a cell. So I can go to the cell right under it, and maybe I want to count how long the movie titles are. So first I'm going to pull this over and get the titles. And I'm going to get title length is going to be the name of my cell. I'm going to use equals to initialize that function. And now we can see we have a function called len, returns the number of characters in a string. So I am going to highlight that. Now this function only takes one argument, which is text. I'm going to highlight A2. I'm going to close that function off. And now we can see that has 9 characters. So now I can just click the plus sign and double click, and that will be populated down. Now maybe what kind of analysis you can do this with this. You might want to see which of the movie titles have the longest value based on the language. Data validation. What is data validation? It's a tool that allows us to control what could or could not be entered into a spreadsheet. It's a part of data governance. data validation. So data validation allows you to control what a user enters into a spreadsheet. So it controls what you can or cannot input. So imagine if we have this data and we want to input names, but we don't want someone to have a very short name because it wouldn't make sense and they could put anything there, or we wouldn't want something too long. So if I highlight the cells here and I go over to, so once you would highlight the cells that you're interested in here, then you would go to the data tab in the ribbon, and then you would click this icon that has a little data validation icon, which has a red like circle in a square. Then I would click that, and I'm going to use data validation. So we want to make sure we only click the cells that we're interested in. Go to the icon here, data validation. And then it's going to give us a prompt. Do we want to extend? No, because we just want to use this column. So we're going to use yes. So we want to be able to restrict the text length. We want the minimum value to be, let's say for a name, 4, and the maximum to be 20. So we're just going to click OK for that. Now, when I go and type a name, let's say I type in Jane. So Jane meets our criteria, but what if I type in Joe? Because Joe is only 3 characters, so it won't allow us to do that. So we may need to change our data validation for people with shorter names. So we can say, it'll ask us to retry. So maybe Joe would have to put his last name also, Joe Billings. Joe Billings. So we can highlight that, go back over to data validation, and maybe we say, okay, we bring that back down to 3, and then Joe will be able to write his name now. So we can also restrict what is entered into the cell. So if I go to gender, we maybe want to restrict those to 2 genders. So I highlight those cells. I go over to data validation. And then what I'm going to do is for the settings, I'm going to do custom. And so for data validation, I'll enter gender. I'll go over to, so we select the cells that we want. We go over to data validation. We go to as a list, because a list is going to be male and female. So then we need to give it a source, which could be outside of this environment and in an Excel source, and I'll show you that in a moment. But in this, I'm going to put male, comma, female. You can also put unknown, and I'm going to click OK. So here, we allow the user only to choose male, female, or unknown. For our marks, we can see that we may want them to not be able to enter something also that is outside of what we desire. So here, you may want to go to data validation by highlighting these rows and choosing a selection. And we might maybe want to choose we want to choose decimal numbers, but we want these decimal numbers to be, the minimum we want to be a 0 and the maximum we want to be 100. So now if I go and enter, maybe this person got a 15. This person got a 45.5. But what if I want to use 101? You will get an error. So now we highlight this again. We go over to data validation. And we can use the error alert and we can change the message if we want. So the input message here or an error message. So the title would be only wrong values. Please change the values. So if I click this and now I go to type in 101, it says please change the values. So you can change that to only enter in this case. So we cancel this. We go to our data validation again. And maybe we want this to say only enter values from 0 to 100. And then if we go back and we type 101, we have this message. For subject, we have values that are here. So now we know we can add a list. So we use data validation here. So we click data validation. We only want to use these cells. We're going to go back over to settings. And then we're going to use a list and as our source, and our source is going to be here. So we only want these to be into K. K, and it usually will choose these automatically if they're sitting outside. So I click that. And then I can only use math, English, and biology. So for birth date, we may also want to use data validation for date. So if I highlight these cells, I go over to data validation. And now you can see it's read the date and we can put between a certain amount. So we want people in our class older than, let's say 2000, but the birth date couldn't be more than, let's say, 2010. So this would be everybody within, let's change that to 1977, and we'll change this to a 1. So people can't enter, and we're going to change this to 1. So what we're saying is that the birth date has to be between 1977 and 2010. So we hit that. And then we say 1/1/1978. So that is okay if we use 1/1. Let's say we use May 22nd, 2022. You will get an error. So that's a good way to use data validation to control what you enter into a data set. Lookup function. So there are several lookup functions that will allow you to bring back data from a lookup value. So VLOOK is probably one of the most used functions in Excel. This function searches for certain values in a column and returns a corresponding piece of information or data field. And how do we use that? We use that from our keyword, VLOOKUP. We tell it what to look up, which is called our lookup value. Then we tell it where to find this value in a table array. We specify where in that table, column 1, column 2, column 3, with a column index number. And then we use true or false to specify exact match or not. HLOOKUP, this is slightly different. This function searches for a certain value in a row and returns a corresponding value. Hence the name H horizontal lookup. We give it a lookup value, we specify the table array, and then the row number. Then we use the optional true and false to bring back an exact match or not. Let's talk about lookup functions. Lookup function is going to allow us to search through our data based on a certain value and return a desired value. So if we're looking at this data set and we have employee ID, we may want to see what the employee salary is based on that ID. So we can use a vertical lookup, or what is known as a VLOOKUP, to bring back data within a column based on another column. So let's set that up. So here I have my data, and I'm going to just call this employee ID for one. And then the next column I'm going to create is salary, and these exist in this data. I'm going to just cell style those. So I'm going to highlight them, go over to cell style, and then I'm just going to choose maybe this. So what I want to be able to do is import or input the employee ID and return the salary. So what I'm going to do here is leave this blank because this is where I will type, and this will be my return section. So I'm going to initialize a function using VLOOKUP. So equals and then VLOOKUP. So what do you want to look up? You want to look up whatever you put in this cell. So then where's my table array? My table array is here. So I am just going to copy all of this over. There's my table. That's the table array. And let me pull this up a little bit. I want to be able to capture all of these. Then I want to be able to say, what's the column index? So here's the table. And you can pull up into the headers, but I just didn't. It doesn't matter. So we have this whole array. And then I want to be able to bring back salary. And salary is 1, 2, 3. So it's our third column. So I'm going to enter 3. Then I'm going to hit column again. Then we have to be able to bring back an approximate or exact match. So true is for approximate, and then false is for exact. So I'm going to choose false for exact. I'm going to hit that in. And now you can see we have this NA value because nothing is here. So let's highlight one of the salaries that we want, and we can do that with conditional formatting or just a highlight. So I'm just going to highlight this particular ID, 2528. I'm going to enter 2528 inside my lookup, and I'm going to see the value for the salary. And there we go. It's 47,189. Let's try another one. I'm going to choose 3773. So this time, let's highlight the whole column, the whole row, and 3773. I'm going to type in 3773, and now we can see 99,029. So that's just a quick way to do a vertical lookup. Let's look at a horizontal lookup. So in this data, we can see we have office supplies. We have office supplies, and the data is structured where we have columns. We have the different supplies, and then under that we have the product ID, quantity, and price. So what we want to be able to bring back is the office supply in the price. And the better way to do this is not a vertical lookup, because we want to be able to look up across the row horizontally. So we want to be able to enter an office supply and bring back the price. So then we're going to leave this blank because this is going to be our entry or input point. we're going to use equals, and then we're going to use HLOOKUP. So HLOOKUP, we want to be able to look up a value. A value is going to be here. And what we want to bring back is our table array. So I'm just going to copy all of these. So here's our lookup table array. Then I'm going to hit comma again. We want a row number. The row number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to bring back 4. Then I am going to say, do I want exact or approximate match? I'll say exact for false. And hit enter. Now we have no value yet because we haven't entered our office supply. So our first one is going to be stapler. So let's just type that in, stapler. And we can see that's 500. Let's bring back erasers. So if I write erasers and hit enter, it's 10. Now you might be asking, what an approximate match would probably give you the same thing. So we can just go in here and write true for approximate match. And let's say this says sheets A4 and I forget the A4. So I write sheets. It's not going to give me what I want, but maybe if I give it a space, A. Nope. 4. Nope. So we can also use pen, and that will give us the amount. This is just a quick way to understand lookup values. Pivot tables. Pivot tables are some of the most important techniques or applications within a spreadsheet. So let's dive into what they are. What is a pivot table? A pivot table is used to sort, count, or group, or total, or reorganize stored data. It helps to change rows into columns and columns into rows. A pivot field or column can be grouped and advanced calculations can be performed on that group. So this is very powerful. Let's talk about sorting and filtering. So we have a data set here. We have a number of columns. We have everything from order number to price details to order date. And all of these will have different data types. And if we highlight, let's say order quantity here, and we navigate over to the top bar under home, you can see this is categorized as general. So often it's better to change these into numbers. So I'm going to change this into a number, and you can see now it's given decimals. I can go under that number bar and click twice and get rid of the decimals because we know this is a whole number. Now that I have that, I can sort this. I highlight this column, I go over to data, then I go to sort, and once I click sort, you can see it says expand the selection. So why would we want to expand the selection? If we just sort within the column, that means we're going to disorganize our data because each one of these quantities is attached to a customer order ID. And I also need to make sure when I move the sorted order quantity, the order ID sorts with it. So now I'm going to expand the selection. Now I'm given this window and it says sort by. So I can now click our quantity ordered column. And because I've changed it into number, it will go smallest to largest or largest to smallest. And now you can see that whole data frame, that whole data section sort. We can also sort by the date. So I'm going to go back to the Home tab. I'm going to highlight the order date, and we can see under the number type or the data type, this is general. General equals text. So we want to change this into a date We can use short date or long date. I'm going to use short date. And now we can see that column is a date. We go over to data. We go over to sort. And we can expand the selection again. And now if I go to order dates, we can see that we have a sort option for newest to oldest or oldest to newest. So I'm going to click oldest to newest. And now we can see that change the order of my table to oldest to newest. Lastly, another type of sort you can use, let's say if we're looking at the order name, we go back over the home, we look at the data type. It's just general, so it means text. If I go back to data and I use sort, and just to show you, and I go by customer name, we can see it will sort alphabetically. So I sort that, and now we can see A is first. Filtering can also be done in a similar way. If I go back over to ordered, quantity order, I go to our data tab and I click filter. We are presented with this new selection. And you can see it here. It looks like a down caret. I click that and I can select each one of these individually, which will truncate our data. And then you just click this to remove it by select all, and we get it back. If I click this again and I go to number filters, and you see we have a different option because we have a different data type, I can say, give me everything greater than, I'm going to say 50. And now we only get values greater than 50. So you could see that as a good sorting. A good filter. We can take that filter off by just clicking this. And going back to select all. Or you can highlight the column and click the filter here. I'm going to go back over to our date and show you the filter there. I added a filter by clicking on filter. And you can see we have the filters broken down by date, month, and date. That's because we changed the date, month, date, and year because we changed this to a proper data type. We can remove the blanks as a filter. We can also do a date filter, which is after or before. So I can say I want everything after maybe July 2nd, 2002. And now we can see we only have dates later than 2002, July 2nd. I can click the filter off. We can also filter by contain. So if I go back to customer name, I go to filter. I click on my icon. I can use text filters because we know we changed this in the text. And I can change this to begins with, and I'm going to say C. Click OK. And now you only get customer names with C. I'm going to click filter off. That's a great way to understand filters and sort. So let's talk about pivot tables. Pivot tables allow us to aggregate data based on a dimension. So that means we can see that all of our data here is individual rows and dimensions without any aggregations. So if I wanted to look at the total order quantity by year, I wouldn't be able to do that with this current data setup. So what we would do is we would use a pivot table. So you can click anywhere within your data, go to Insert, And then once you're in Insert, you can see the Pivot Table option. We can click Pivot Table. It's going to ask you what your data range is. Automatically, it will select the data if it's in a table format. And I'm going to put this pivot table on a new worksheet. I click OK. And the first thing you're going to be able to see is a blank space. And then we have this Pivot Table option. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for you. And in the pivot table options, if I navigate back over to my section here, I'm going to make this. There we go. And now you can see all of our columns in this section. So remember, we wanted to create a aggregation by year. So we do have a year column. And if you can't see it, you can always use the search bar. Here's our year ID. Now you have to think about how you want your data to look. If I want to see this by year, I can see by year by column. So you can see in our pivot table, we have a filter, column, rows, and then the values. So first we establish the column and row structure. So I'm going to pull this over to columns and show you what it looks like. I can also pull this into years to have, into rows to have years by row. So it's up to you how you want to visualize your data. So let's leave this at the row value at the moment. Then we want to get our ordered quantity because we know that's our number, and we ensured that we did a ordered quantity by changing the number format. And now we have quantity ordered, and we can drag this in values. And now you can see this is a sum of the order. And this is not the one we're looking for. We're looking for quantity ordered. Now, if we pull this into values, we have the sum of the quantity ordered. We can change that aggregation because right now it's the sum. We can change it by clicking the arrow, going to value and field settings, and going to average or count. So let's change that to an average, and we can see the average is 34.6, 34.8, and 36.8. So we can see that's increasing over time. Now you might be asking yourself, can we create more of this analysis? We are seeing the average by year, but maybe we want to see by year and by month. So we can find the month by just searching, and maybe we bring the month over to the column ID. Now that doesn't look that great, so probably it's better to switch these from column to row. And now what we can see is across the years by month, we can see the average ordered value increase or decrease. We can also add another layered dimension under our rows. So maybe you want to see the customers. So I'm going to bring customer name under rows. And now we can see by year and by month, by each individual customer, what they are ordering and the average order amount. Finally, what we can do is we can take that customer name, bring that under filters, and now we can filter which customer we're interested in. So maybe I'm only interested in Alpha Cognac, so I can click that, and that data will be available for that particular customer. And pivot tables are the great way to group, aggregate, and structure your data. Data visualization using Excel. Excel is a great tool for visualization and to be able to communicate insights and then even capture those visuals and share them on PowerPoint or in an email. So what are the different types of data visualization that are out there? A pie chart. A pie chart represents a part of a whole. Each slice is composed of 3 components: area, central angle, and an arc, just like a pie. And we can see from this representation that each color represents an amount. And this legend gives us the representation of that color. Of course, we can alter and optimize these charts. A bar chart. A bar chart uses different bands and the height of those bands to show different amounts so that we can distinguish the different value amounts. A bar chart is used to represent comparative data. So you can think about categorical data. Line charts. It's a visual representation that shows change over time. So the category data is along the horizontal lines sometimes, for example, the months or the years or even the date. And all values are along the vertical axis. The vertical axis will be our amounts or value. So this visualization is usually preferred when one parameter is non-numeric, like a date or a month. Tree charts. Tree charts provide a hierarchical view of your data. It makes it easy to recognize patterns by giving you the ability to see the size compared to each other. It's good for comparing proportions within the hierarchy. For example, if we look at this visual here, we can see that the biggest proportion is India, next to Saudi Arabia, and then Russia, Germany, and the hierarchy continues. Map chart. We all know what maps are. It's used to navigate values and show categories across different geographical regions. Let's talk about creating visuals in Excel. So now we see we have a 2-column data set where we have countries with the data type general and the GDP per capita with the GDP in accounting format. We can highlight this data set, go to Insert, and then we can use the charting feature. We can go to Recommended Charts, which would be static charts that we can't manipulate so much. And you can see we have a list of charts. They give us a clustered column chart. So if we click that, we double click that, we get a column chart. We can change the axis, delete the axis. For example, if I didn't want the axis here, I could right click and delete it. I could click my values, and then I could use some of the chart element options, such as adding data labels, like that. We can also change the way the chart is formatted by clicking the data bars, going to format the data series. And here we can make the gap between the bars smaller, where we have a different appearance. We can also overlap them. Also, when you choose this, we can use different styles of charts. From the chart design section here, there is a lot of options here. But remember, if you choose the chart design, it's going to overwrite your styling. So I'm going to leave that here. I'm going to also do the same thing, go back to Insert, and then I'm going to create, instead of using recommended charts, you can use the charts here. I am going to choose a chart here as a pie chart. Again, we can change the label styling by if we click labels. We can highlight the data labels. We can go to format the data labels. And then we can add the percentage and the category name there. So that means we wouldn't need the legend. You can change the colors of any individual element, either by highlighting everything, if I highlight all of the elements, and I go over to format the data series in the right side, we can change the way that looks for fill. For example, I can make it all blue. Then I can go to an individual section and go to the top fill here and just click that, and I can change that. So there's a lot of options we can use for the different type of styling our graphs. So I'm going to place that one here. Also, you don't need to always use a 2-column or 3-column. We can use what we call a 1 variable or univariate. For example, maybe I want to just see GDP as a chart. I can go to Insert, and if I click Recommended Charts, you can see what happens is it becomes a little confused. It just counts it. But we can use some statistical charts like a histogram. If I want to change this to something else, I can go to Change Chart Type, and I can use a box and whisker plot. So there's a lot of options. I'm going to move this down here. Because these values are all similar, it's not a good example. So I'm going to bring this down here. Also, we can use a tree map. So if I highlight both of these and I go to Insert and I do Recommended Charts, if I look at everything, I can go to All Charts. And then once you go to All Charts, you will see Tree Map. And then you can click that, hit OK. And now you have a tree map. We can change the different stylings here from the top chart design style. And I'm going to leave that there. Now remember that you were able to create a pivot table before. And the great thing about Excel is we can create a pivot chart. So let's go back over to our pivot data. And you can see we can create a pivot table. If you remember, we go to Insert. And now you can see we have pivot table. But if you navigate over to where you see the charting features, we can use a pivot chart. So if we click that and we want to go to a new worksheet, we will be presented with this option where we have our pivot table, and then we have a visual here. So if I wanted to see the sales by date, here's our order date. I'm going to put that in our axis because it's going to automatically choose that. And then I'm going to choose the order quantity. And remember, we can always search for that. And I'm going to bring that into values. And now you can see it's broken down by years. And this is the chart. So I can also go back up here to the top section and go to Design. And I can change the chart type to a line. So, and if I hit OK, and now you can see that this order is years, month, and date. So what we can do is remove the quarters and remove the years. And now we can see this by month. So when we have a pivot chart, we can also do things with our filters. So maybe I wanted to filter this by our, let me move this. We can filter this by state. So I can bring state into filters. And if I wanted to go here, now I can select a specific state where I want to see that line change. Also, we don't have to be stuck with just one. What you can do is you can bring states over to the columns, and we can go back to our filter, and we can add another state and hit OK. And now we have two states aligned. Now that would be a pivot chart. So if I go back to our data and I go to Insert, you can see we have a map. But if I go to Recommended Charts, this is also there. If I go to All Charts, and you can see the globe. And if I click this option, now we can see our map. We can use different styles of maps, of course, to indicate what we want to show. And the maps are very nice. So there's a lot of ways to express yourself through data visualization in Excel. Class, what have we covered? We discussed about the phases of a data analysis project. We learned about the importance of data cleaning. Then we discussed about different types of functions. We learned about conditional formatting. Then we did a brief overview of data validation and pivot tables. At the end, we discussed visualization and Excel charts.
If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to request you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any new update or video releases from Great Learning. If you enjoyed this video, show us some love and like this video. Knowledge increases by sharing, so make sure you share this video with your friends and colleagues. Make sure to comment on the video for any query or suggestions, and I will respond to your comments.